Hey, good morning. April 25th edition, Doug Pagitt Radio, broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities, and as we like to say around here, around the world, maybe even on the space station. Someday, we're going to get confirmation about that. I'm Doug Pagitt, and we're going to be joined in a little bit by Victoria Lynn, our regular sidekick here on the show, sometimes referring to herself as the co-host, which she is. The co-host, Victoria Lynn, will be joining us. And we're going to have two guests on the show today, a lively conversation with two, one new friend, one who's been a friend of mine for a while. The friend for a while, Brian Sergio, he has written a book called The 6 Marks of Progressive Christian Worship. So it's going to be an interesting conversation with him about, he's a person who thinks a lot about music and the role of music inside of Christian communities, and he's going to have a lot to say about that. And then a friend named Olden Holder. Olden Holger has written a book called From Rants to Revelations. Rants to Revelations. And so that's going to be an interesting conversation. Hey, so before Victoria gets here, I want to let you all know, I have this little application on my phone. It's called Time Hop, the Time Hop app. And what it does is it takes your social media postings from previous times, from Facebook and Twitter, and I guess it would do Instagram and Pinterest and some of these other things. And what it does is every day it curates those and then gives you this this reminder of what your posts were from a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. It's really quite fascinating. And I shared one with a friend of mine. Who had something very good happen in his life 2 years ago, and said, "Hey, I saw my little time hop that I was at this thing with you a couple of years ago, and you had this good thing going on." And he didn't find. I thought it was really great because I thought, I like this thing. I like to be reminded about the things that have happened. Some things I have forgotten. I have a terrible memory about the past, great memory about the future, terrible memory about the past, and I think time hop's great because it totally. I mean, it's like I'm reading a book for the first time. Like I have no memory at all of these things until my little time hop tells me, and then I totally remember them. Right? It's one of the funny things about the way, at least some of our memories work. Well, he didn't find that to be very appealing at all. He was like, "Hey, there's a number of things in my life that I have wanted to forget, that I don't want to listen to it, that I don't remember at all," and I like it a lot, and it caused me to consider how different people want to arrange themselves in relationship to the past and to the future. And I think it has a lot to do with how we think about our daily life, how we think about our religion, how we think about our families, how we think about our hope, all that kind of stuff. Hey, Victoria Lynn.
Hi.
How are
Sorry
you?
I'm late.
That's all right. You got stuff to do.
Yeah.
You're a very busy woman.
Yeah, what you talking about?
got things
Sounds
going.
really interesting.
Oh, isn't it interesting? I thought it was
I have
interesting
no idea
too.
what it is, though.
No, but I so want to hear more about it. That's just sort of that's the right attitude. It's the right attitude for life right there. I have this application on my phone called Time Hop.
Oh,
Time Hop.
the time machine that we wanted last. It already exists.
Well, you would think, but all it does is tells you what you wrote on Facebook and Twitter and I guess Instagram and those kinds of things from a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago.
It catalogs everything.
Yeah, so
place.
each day you get a little report, a little screenshot that comes up and says 1 year ago you posted this.
Oh.
2 years ago you posted this. 3 years ago this. And then other interesting things that happened have happened 10 years ago and 100 years ago on this date.
I'm curious.
Yeah, so it's like your own on this date.
It's like looking back in your diary in the virtual age.
See, and I find it really interesting because of that.
Yeah.
And I liked it. So I realized that a year ago today, I had 101 temperature and didn't know why. Now,
I know.
51 weeks ago today was when I found out that I had hepatitis. So it took me a week.
Yeah.
But I was sick for like almost a month in there, and I couldn't figure it out and kept feeling sick. And then I got this really bad fever, and but I had totally forgotten. I remember that I had hepatitis, but I wouldn't have thought that it was on April 25th.
Right. I was feeling like we were around that 1 year anniversary point of when you were, you were sick.
I was sick,
You had
yeah.
been sick for a while. But when you figured out what it was,
Yeah,
was
isn't that
this
interesting?
day.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
And other good things have gone on in people's lives. A couple years ago, Dr. Anthony Jones, friend of mine,
Yes.
was defending his dissertation and became a doctor officially on this day.
Yeah,
That was on there. I hadn't remembered that.
yeah.
I hadn't remembered that the day, a year anniversary from my 101 temperature was his. And I don't know if there's
defense.
anything to this, right? Maybe there's something, because, the whole date business, right? Like that horoscopes do and other systems do. I've never really bought it because of that whole leap year thing, right? Like, I don't know. If you've got to have a leap year every 7 years where one of the months is off, then I'm like, these dates don't really correspond to anything.
I've
Like, there's
never really
there's a
bought
glitch.
the exact date thing, but I do believe that there's seasons, and I've noticed with myself that certain things will happen at particular seasons, and I'll find I'm thinking a lot about maybe a particular person, and then I realize, oh, this is around the time that person died or was very sick, and this is the time I realized this person was dying. So, like, lately I've been thinking a lot about my maternal grandma, and I'm like, I was trying to remember when she died or what it is about this season. I can't remember.
Like
what.
spring or something?
Yeah. And so I do think that there is something to dates
I do too.
or times.
Yeah, at
seasons.
least a season. Yeah,
Yes.
or at least
Yeah.
maybe generally an anniversary.
Gotta accommodate leap year,
But
the full moon.
But overplaying the date, like on this day, which I think horoscopes do that. I don't actually know if they
Yeah.
maybe they're more broad than that.
Absolutely.
They do?
That's
All
what they print in the paper. On this
Well, I
day,
think
you're
so,
going
too.
to find love.
But
Whatever.
I have found that some of the people who are really into horoscope stuff are like, no. See, that's like you as a Christian person saying that everybody who watches a televangelist on TV understands Christianity. They're like, no, it's way more sophisticated than that, and that's kind of a.
And that
but
may be.
It may be. I don't know. So I don't want to throw the horoscopers under the bus.
Yeah.
But I do like this. But I'm becoming more convinced of it with this time hop because I look back on this day and I'm like, wow. Now that I have a different, because I don't keep a journal. Like maybe people who keep journals have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, but you have to go back and look at them. I mean,
That's right. It doesn't push to you. You just pop up on your screen when you're
right.
sitting
So
at a
I'm always
stoplight.
surprised. I'm not a journaler, but I'm a writer, so I have lots of notebooks of stuff.
Oh.
I'm kind of surprised when I go back in there, but I don't really use them to go back to. I use them for different purposes. So I don't tend to. I'm not somebody who goes back.
Oh.
As much as I should. I'm always
Then why do you write them down?
well.
What are
That's
you
a
doing
whole
there?
nother conversation.
I mean, is it just the practice? Like, it'd be fine if they disappeared?
It helps me remember things, or I'm usually like I do write down poems, and I do go back to them and rework them, and all of that sort of thing. But I don't necessarily keep a log of my actions. It bores me to death. I have no interest in that. So.
Really? Well, try time hop. You find
Yeah,
yourself
that
far more
might be kind
interesting
of
than you
fun.
thought you were. Like,
Yeah,
man,
time
that
hop
book I
sounds
read,
fun.
that other thing, yeah. And then there's this other new little interesting app. This is gonna be like our social tech day
Yeah.
here on the show, called I think it's called Snapchat. You familiar with this?
No.
I learned about it 2 weeks ago. I was speaking somewhere and talking about changes in churches and culture and social media and stuff. And this woman said, my daughter is really a big fan of Snapchat. Do you know about that? And I said, no. What is this? And it's an application that allows you to send pictures to another person. Like you take a picture with your phone, send a picture to that other person, and you set the timer on how long the picture lasts. 10 seconds to 30 seconds, I think it is, maybe 60.
Yeah.
So it'll show up on your phone, you'll see it in the app, and then it will disappear after that amount of time,
Oh, it's
10
like,
seconds or 20 seconds.
hey.
Yep, it's just a quick thing, shows up, and then goes away. So it doesn't get stuck on your phone. Nobody can go through it and see it. Doesn't take up any space on your phone. You don't have to
Erase it.
or play with it or anything. And people are all worried. And I brought up instantly, like right at that moment, what other parents are worried about with teenagers being in this is that it's going to be all about sexting. You're going to send dirty, nasty little pictures. But apparently teenagers are like, no, actually, we don't do that so much. But, like...
These are just the dirty old middle-agers that are thinking that.
Yeah. Not everybody's a dirty old congressman, Not everybody's going to send pictures of their genitals.
My first thought was, well, but how do you know the person saw it?
Well, it times out only when they open it in their app.
Oh, so it will go
So
that's better.
Yes, it doesn't just exist in the air. That's true. I guess I did make it sound like that.
Like a
somebody's
wink.
standing in a field yelling out orders and no one's around. They're like,
Nobody heard you.
but it's interesting, isn't it, to take like okay, so get over the whole notion of like anything that's on the internet lasts on the internet, and there's a lot of ways that you could capture these images and keep them forever. That being okay, with that not being the point. The point being, this shift now to the temporary communication
Yeah.
sensibility.
This is part of how we talk to each other.
Right now, it exists
Yeah.
and then goes away
Yeah.
versus this time hop thing where someone is able to go back and see the things that they wrote. Like both of those seem interesting.
Yes.
This kind of temporal and this kind of permanence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, knowing neither of them are either fully temporal
Or fully permanent.
fully permanent, of course.
But still.
But isn't that an interesting way to think about things?
Mm-hmm.
Like how would you organize? Just thinking about your life in terms of what would you want to be around for a long time, and what do you want to only exist for a moment?
Yeah.
What's like we had this conversation around recording our religious experiences at Solomon's Porch, the church we're part of. For a long time, we did before you were around. Well, even after you were around. For a long time, we've talked, some of us, about like what do we do with the thing that happens on Sunday nights?
Mm-hmm.
Should we record that?
Yeah.
So that people can go back and listen to it later. And we said, no, we don't want to record it, because if you do, then people are going to talk, they're going to act during the meeting like it's something that's going to be around forever.
Yeah.
So they're going to say different things or not say certain things or say things differently.
Yeah.
So let's not make it available after, like it is only a live experience. You can only access it right then, not later.
Yeah.
And then other times we've thought, no, maybe we should keep it around a little bit. Like maybe it's okay. Maybe people are, but it's an interesting question about, is your collective religious experience something that people are supposed to go back to?
Because we do web streaming now at
Now,
Solomon's
yeah.
Porch,
So-
and it stays.
Yes.
It's something.
Well, that was a big question, right?
Yeah.
So the transition has been, let's experiment. Let's live stream it, because the live streaming is a version of it's
Being
happening
there.
right now,
Yeah.
and it goes away. But we didn't save it.
Yeah.
There was no saving of it. And now we've said, well, let's see if saving of it really changes anything or not, and see if it.
I mean, I don't think anybody thinks about it much
Yeah, I think that's true.
in the experience. When you're there, I mean, you've got plenty of other things to think about.
Yeah, it's
a
distracting
busy
enough.
experience.
Yeah, it's distracting
You
enough.
can't
Nobody's
be
worried about the philosophy of the the thing
of
I
their
shared.
comments.
If
Yeah.
someone's going to come back and look at that later, but it does seem to me that it raises an interesting notion about how we think about our lives. Like, do we think about our lives as being something that should be cataloged and kept? Because if you were to go through someone's keepsakes when they die, which some of us have had to do, right? Parents or others, you could, if you didn't know this person and you tried to piece together their life by their keepsakes, you would have a very peculiar version of that person's life,
Yeah, you
right?
would.
Like apparently they vacationed a lot. And when their children were young, they really, really liked them. Then as they got older, they didn't want pictures of them anymore. So they stopped taking pictures of the kids because I think they didn't like them, right? Like, but it doesn't really tell you that person's life or something. So what you choose to collect or to keep, like we have pictures all around our house. So they're in this room I'm in, and you're like, why did we keep those images?
Yeah.
Why those versus any other ones? Like why?
I often
why
think that when I look at your pictures.
do you
Just kidding.
do you? And
No, not so much.
and I think it raises a question that one should take a moment to sort of reflect on, right? Like, is there something better about a lasting life or impression or moment versus something that was momentary and really great?
Yeah.
And I don't want to compete them against each other if they don't need to be competed against each other, but there's a tendency to think about life as having lasting impact, being better than a life that was sort of flurious,
Ephemeral.
happened, was great, then went away, and people didn't think about it again.
Yeah.
Like there's something we have in our sensibilities about being maybe spiritual people or religious people or something.
That the longer it sticks around, the better it is. And that's not necessarily true.
That somehow there's a
does
spiritual
Time Hop,
value to that.
Can you go into Time Hop and see everything from the last 3 years, or do you just get these alerts?
I think
this
it's just
happened this
I think
day?
it's just a phone app that every day gives you
Because as a writer, I wonder about this, like archiving. I wonder how technology has changed, like the work of biographers, for example.
Sure. Yes,
Like,
I've heard a lot about that from those people.
oh, have you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like going through people's emails, going
Uh-huh.
through Facebook profile, getting access to all that, because so much of our life is going into, so much of our recording of
In
what
fact,
we
there's
do.
a big question about when someone dies, who owns the rights to their digital impression.
Yeah.
And it's not as clear as you might think. You might think, oh, well,
Obviously, it'd be a spouse or a child.
it doesn't move from person to person.
Huh.
Yeah, it's real. So, in fact, Google has now started slowly rolling out this procedure or process or agreement on where you could set up someone to be the beneficiary of your digital life. So you could say, if it's no longer accessible to me, then this is the person who gets access to it.
So
And nobody else. So you don't get to call up and say, I'm the executor of this estate. I need their password to get into their computer. They can be like, nope.
Yeah.
It's real. I mean, it's
You have
become
to-
a very curious. In fact, Facebook won't let you, if they know that someone has died, they turn that into a memorial. So they have a memorial version of the site. They
and
take
they
it
just
away.
shut it down.
Yeah, they archive it. It goes away, and so you can't keep speaking as that person.
Interesting.
And I don't know about the legalities of how they make that argument.
And then
but
can
it's-
somebody
but people
go
are
in
having to-
and look at that archive?
Yes, is it even accessible or
Yeah,
So
what is
so the people, but it's this larger question, really. I mean, that just gives you a specific thing. Oh, what do I do about Facebook or whatever? But you're raising the larger question, which is the right one, right? Which is
Well, Tony
how does
Jones
one
just
think about
had a
this?
Facebook post the other day about if you double post things, the same things.
I saw that. What a whiner that guy is sometimes.
He was like, "Which one do you want me to
To
delete?"
not follow.
Yeah, because I don't want to delete, and people don't understand social media. He was cranky about it. a little bit.
He was trying to say you shouldn't double post. And other
He
people-
was saying that, but he was also seemed like he genuinely wanted to clean out his stream. And I mean, I assumed that. But it was a curious,
If you
like,
don't have
we're
anything nice to
getting
say,
inundated
running
with
through my head.
another thought about, like, what's lasting, what's not, another, it's like all the input we're getting all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm thinking about this app, like, do I want another input every day?
Yes, right.
This might be worth it.
Well, it's because
But-
it's you. Because it's like seeing a mirror. It's not somebody else's stream that's
I
interrupting
did
your life.
used to
It's
go
like,
back when I
that's my
kept
life.
a physical calendar. I did used to sometimes like
Yeah.
look at it, or just maybe sometimes it would accidentally happen if
Uh-huh.
I'd go back to look at some piece of information. I'd be like, "Oh, that's right, that happened," and
Yeah,
forgot about that stuff.
I know.
But
It's-
then, does it? Do we need to remember it?
Okay, see, this is the big question that it raises, right? Which is, look, if it's not memorable, you don't need to remember it. That is such a. I mean, I'm that way. I'm that guy. I say
I know,
stuff
because
like that.
you don't remember anyway.
I say stuff
so
like
you're
that. Yeah,
just
I have terrible memory.
justifying your horrible memory.
So I'm like, nothing's been worth anything. So no, but that's not true. That like
No.
the way your particular brain is going to catalog and categorize ideas and experiences and all the complexity that goes into whatever memory is to say, oh, if it was important, you would have remembered it. Nope, I don't think that's the case. I don't think you're necessarily going to remember it if it was important. Or if you remembered it, it was important.
Right.
I don't think it's going to work that way either. But doesn't it raise this big question about, well, how should we organize our things? Like how do we even know what the important...
And those of us who have
maybe
memory issues, already have strategies for dealing with
That's
our
right.
memory issues and know that we forget really important things
and-
all the time.
Yes, and maybe important is not the right word
Yeah.
to put with it. Maybe it has nothing to do with the import. Like
No.
when I was younger, and my mom would forget my birthday, not forget it on my birthday, but couldn't remember like
When it was.
when it was or what year I
Yeah.
was born or something.
Yeah.
I was like, because when you're like 12 or 15, you're like, what? How can nobody remember the center of the universe? Like, are you kidding? Like,
You're like, you don't understand when you're 12
oh.
the way the years stretch out. You're
Yes.
like, what
And
happened
then you're like,
back in-"
okay, all I'm remembering right now is a number.
Mm-hmm.
Because as my children have been like, Dad, I'm 21. I'm not
know.
22. I'm like, oh, what?
And then
But-
there's those people.
And they think it's like about importance. Because if that, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm your child and you birthed me or you adopted me. Like,
Yeah.
we're so important. Yes, you are. But then the circumstances around that reality may or may not come, may
With
or
the
may not
number.
stick.
There might not be
Yeah.
a number that sticks to that.
You're too important for me to be bothered by the number.
But there are those people, like my 5th grade teacher, if I saw him out on the street today, he would remember how old I was. Every time I would not
Really?
see him. Yeah, he's just that guy.
Wow.
And you think he has a lot of kids to remember. Well, now we're really grown up, but yeah, it never ceased to amaze
And
me.
isn't it interesting how we determine that in some things in our culture, like that is an honorable.
Yeah, that's important.
Wow.
But then those
Look
of
at
us
him.
who can't remember
the guy
stuff
is a
like that.
savant. Obviously and clearly, he's savant-like, right? So all the other characteristics that go with being a 6th grade. What was he, math teacher?
He was
Social
my
study teacher?
general teacher, and he was a very
general
good
teacher.
teacher.
Yeah, I'm sure he
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah.
But all the other things that you wouldn't have picked up on the clues as a sixth grader or a 18-year-old or something.
Yeah.
That I'm just guessing, somebody who can remember stuff like that. That
Not have been the most sensitive.
That feature tends to come as a part of a whole package.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. So but we like reward this one thing.
Yeah.
And
but not other things.
and not these other things. And that's what gets curious about it to me.
Yeah, we should start rewarding people who have other kinds of alternative-ish memories.
Yeah, and I do think that's one of the arguments within our culture all the time. That's one of the political arguments. It's one of the religious arguments. It's one of the larger, who do you like to be around and who do you think should be rewarded culturally. That's part of it, is that different skill sets are encouraged or cheered on in different communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do think that's what happens. That people
and they become liabilities or disabilities in other places.
Right. So if you're a really good reader and thinker and analyzer, you're going to hang around a group of people over time, because we live in now a bit of a self-selecting society. You're going to hang around a group of people over time that have really different passions and desires and impulses than people who can run really fast and slam their body into somebody else without discomfort, right?
Are you saying that those two things are mutually exclusive?
I'm not. I'm just saying those two groups of people
don't often cross paths.
Reward one another differently. Reward each other. Reward themselves differently. So you end up over time in these really different kinds of worlds, right? And then, because we all want to not be so petty, we tend to minimize the thing that drew us together.
Yeah.
Because that seems petty, right? So then you want to universalize your experience so you don't seem so restricted. So you universalize it into a larger conversation about how things ought to be.
Yes.
And what you're really doing is you're saying, if people were like me, these would be your values.
Yes.
And that turns into this big cultural stir and divide and
really
religion.
Irritates me. It really bugs me
that people universalize it.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's no value in making things bigger or looking at the bigger potential implications, but always with a reference or acknowledgement of this came out of this personal thing.
Yeah.
And it might be that it's only a personal
Yeah.
thing.
I'm going to post a conversation I had with a guy yesterday. I did a little video version of the radio show interview with the guy I wanted to have on the show, but he couldn't do it. Anyway, he wrote an article for Christianity Today, and I was interviewing about it. And he and I come from different perspectives on this, and it sort of came up that I was saying, look, I think some of these people who are saying Christianity in this way, that's just sort of how it goes for the group of people they hang around with. My problem is they universalize it.
And say it should be that way for everybody.
So for everybody. And I don't think we should ever universalize. And that's where we had this difference, because
Really? He thought that there are some universal things.
oh, he's and here's what's I would refer to him as a universalist. No, he would see. Depends what you mean by that word. I think you turn your ideas into the universal truths, and I think so. In fact, I'm gonna play. I might be playing that out. My conversation with the new universalist.
Can he handle that?
No, he'd be fine. It was no. It was great. It was a great conversation.
Some people would get really upset. So
oh yeah, but
it's funny.
They'll know someone's like me when you're doing that. I'm simply being clever, not right. As it turns out, they're not always the same thing, which is really a pain in the ass, actually.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Hey, we're
know.
going to be back with Ogden Holder. He wrote a book called Rants to Revelations.
All right.
Yeah. So, and
I hope he'll do some ranting and revelation. And
well, that's a good question.
have that.
We should ask him
Nice.
if he would be up for something just like that. So we'll be back here after the break. If you're listening on Spreaker, rolling over to the next one, same way in the videos.